2 minutes past 9. This is Mark Means Business. I'm Andrew Barije and I'm with Falda Kirabo. And we're here breaking down what has been really happening all around the continent, around the region in the past days of the festive season, but of course also getting to take a look at the 2024, some of the key events that have been happening around the East African nations. Now, the key highlights here, we take a look at Kenya's startup scene in 2024. Now, this comes at a time where most of the startups have actually been experiencing what we call a winter funding. Let me say that there is some sort of a winter when it comes to funding the startups in Africa, whereby, like recently, where we saw a story between Germany trying to have a deal with Kenya in terms of technology-related aspects, and later Germany realizes that the people that are employed in this particular, can I say, foreigners that go to work in their countries don't have the exact expertise to do that. What does that really mean? That means if the labor we export in Europe is not competent, what is going to be the motivating factor for the European nations to fund the startups in Africa? Because there is a winter that we're experiencing. There is less money that is coming into, I think it declined by about 40%. That is a very big percentage. And when we talk about startups, even Uganda, we're inclusive into that. It also affects us. It is Africa. And the fact that we are not even yet there yet when it comes to some of the innovations really puts us in absolute danger, most especially if we say we are relying on digital transformation for economic growth and development. Now, 2024 has been a year of ups and downs for most of the Kenyan startups, as entrepreneurs and enterprises are trying to balance uncertain economic and political environment at home and the continuing funding winter in the continent. Exactly, just like I'd mentioned about this. Now, the year began on a depressing note when the B2B e-commerce startup market forced downscaled operations in 3 of its 5 markets and sought to explore other business models. Now, the startup, of course, founded in 2018 by Tesh Babu, was present, that is in Kenya, Nigeria, talking about Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda at the same time. Now, it had also planned to expand to Ethiopia and talking about Ghana through a partnership which was said it would be very absolute for that. So that is something in the line of the startup landscape, and there is a lot that is happening. Maybe, Ifalda, if I may ask you, what do you think, looking at the African context, but of course not leaving out Uganda, should we say that initiatives to skill Africans or Ugandans in order to make them competent to produce for the global economy are weak? Do you think they are weak in terms of skilling Africans?
If it is on production for the whole globe at large, of course we are still weak because we do not have the resources per se when it even just comes down to machinery and things like that. But given that we are predominantly in agriculture, like the African continent is well known for having the vast lands, the healthy, fertile things. There is we can specialize in the production that we can do. And earlier in the year, we had a talk from one of the billionaires in Nigeria, and this is what he was saying.
Okay.
If we could look at just making agriculture the real business of the African continent, then that is probably a route we can take, because are we going to compete in the industrial sector? We cannot compete internationally, because those other countries, they have way bigger projects that they are running, you know? And if we looked at that as agriculture, look at Uganda, for example. We are one of the big exporters, of coffee, right? But the coffee comes back to us when it's very pricey. Reason being, we do not have much of the resources to give the same quality that they probably have. Or maybe we haven't even given ourselves a chance. Because they say again that in Africa alone, the opportunities are the first things that should come for the skilling to happen. You're not going to find an African skilling for an opportunity that is not existing already.
Yeah, sure.
So those are some of the things that we should look at doing as being in the African continent in order to be able to try to compete globally with our resources. But then again, that does not end there, because we look at the issue of our bargaining power, which is something that of course affects the way that we relate when it comes to
that's important.
when it comes to businesses. Our bargaining power is low. Look at, for example, the UN. When we look at such spaces, we cannot stand up and speak, because first of all, there's the aspect that we are always relying on foreign aid, right? Foreign aid alone to just run our economies even just our political decisions of who is probably going to be the next president. The shots are called from out of the country itself. So when it comes to such aspects, growth is not going to just come in easily, because it needs to first take a little bit of stages that I think should be addressed when it comes down to just the regional integrations that we have. That is where we can start speaking, so that we can be able to grow big and start competing internationally when it comes to production and the skills that we have for the market. That's what I think.
Well, you're very right on that. And actually, recently I've been trying to study, to make a little study, my own study, and I was trying to study the cultures in America. Studying the cultures in South America, studying the relations, Africa, then Asia and Europe. And I got to realize one thing. Talking about, just on what you've mentioned about the skilling and all that, in Africa, we have something in relation to, we are socialists by nature. So in other words, we care about families and all this. In other words, the nature of individualism is not who we are. When you go to the United States, of course, it's about the freedom, having practical solutions that are real, putting deadlines to that. And going back to Europe, you see these are people that fancy a lot the old traditions, but they also have some similar cultures. But surprisingly, when I look into that, it's like as though there is what we call exportation of these cultures. And some of these cultures have been exported to Africa. How? Through the leaders that we have, corruption, embezzlement of the public funds, whereby one individual benefits over the rest. So that kills the socialistic idea that we have birthed. And that does not only affect us in that way, but it affects all various aspects, even we the individuals who are being led by some of these leaders. Because if these leaders would really wish good for us, then we would be really seeing initiatives that are meant to skill Africans coming to a success. But because the leaders, some of the finances, the cost of training Africans, the funds are embezzled from an individualistic perspective. And I think it explains why the funders have withdrawn to fund the startups in Africa. Taking a look at how these funds have been utilized and so many more. So I think there is also that picture. If you review it at the culture context, culture, we're trying to embrace this culture entirely. Now, see what individualism has done to Africa. Look at the poverty rates, whereby in Africa you find that 2% owning over 95%. So the 98% are sharing the 5% of resources. What do you expect? Wars, there's going to be wars, violence. And what is that? So it's all just some sort of a chaos that I'm seeing in there. Well, now, the mergers and acquisitions and deals that shaped 2024, we are looking at what is in East Africa. Now, as the curtain falls on 2024, this year will go down in annals of history. as a period with mixed, mixed bag of challenges to individuals, businesses, and talking about the government too. Now, the start of the year was characterized by elevated inflation, a weaker shilling, and high interest rates, which called for extra measures to stay afloat. That is from the volatility. Now, towards the end of the year, the country has worsened. We're talking about Kenya, has witnessed some ease, albeit at a slow pace, with inflation dropping from high of 6.9% in January to 2.8% in November. Now, the ease access to loans, the Central Bank of Kenya has also lowered base lending rate to about 11.25% in December from the high of about 13% in February. Well, what does that really call in for? In Uganda, we've seen scenarios where, despite the fact that the lending rates, the central bank reduced the bank rate, but still the business people are still complaining of loans being so high to that line. And with that, it tries to make me feel, what is 2025 going to start like? You know, so these are facts that we are looking into here to that. Now, on December 19th, Amson's Industries completed its buyout. Remember, we're talking about the mergers for 2024. Now we see Amson's Industries in Kenya completed its buyout deal of Bamburi Cement, when the shareholders of the listed cement manufacturers agreed to transfer about 340.4 million shares to the Tanzanian subsidiary. Now, the deal was valued at about 0.59 billion, was perhaps the most watched acquisition of the second half of 2024, and has known just because it involved one of the most iconic companies that is in Kenya. Now, Amson's launched the bid that is 65 Kenyan shillings a share. That is in July, before Savannah Clinker placed a higher counter offer a share. Now, in October, Savannah Clinker also hiked its offer to about 76.55 a share before controversially withdrawing its bid in the early December for that. So, part of the mergers that happened in there for Kenya that spread, that made outstanding news for that. Okay, and now we have another story here, of course, coming into Africa as the African unicorns, the most funded startups in Africa by 2024. Now, the past 2 years have been difficult, like we've been mentioning, for the African startups. Now, as macroeconomic challenges deter investors from generously pumping capital in the innovation system, more startups are restructuring their operations to realign with the new state of affairs. Now, however, some startups are waiting in billions of dollars in capitation, and their investors are confident that they are on the path to successful exits. Wow. Now, there is a lot, and part of the key startups have been, really highlighted here, the likes of InterSwitch, that is based in Nigeria, the likes of MNT Halan, that is in Egypt, then Flutterwave, which all of you are so familiar with. So all these, are really are the most funded so far as we speak, despite the winter that we are going through. But however, how sustainable is this funding going to be? Falda, don't you think the sustainability of funding of any of these startups is based on their ability to solve the societal challenges in Africa? Like what I've been saying, that in everything we do, the first question is, how is society benefiting? It's not about the composition of the project. It's not about the composition of your startup. Having a good presentation, you present, but can it help the local person whom they call Omuntu in that line? Don't you think, to me, I feel like if I'm to find you, Falda, you have a startup. I need to see, because I'm giving you this money and I'm expecting in the future to have that money back. But then I don't see your startup solving problems. How am I going to continue funding you?
Exactly. And when you say it targeting Omuntu Awazi, in Uganda, I think that is going to be close to impossible. Because for anyone to fund these startups, I'm of the belief that most of them have to be fully registered. That alone is a requirement that some people cannot meet.
Registered,
because someone needs to know the registration of everyone needs to work with someone they can trust.
They can trust,
because at the end of the day, they are investing their resources in you, you know, to solve something which is likely not to happen. So at least the list that they need to know is whether you are up to standard to what they are going to be giving you, you know. And most, of course, foreign investors, they look at such companies. When we look at the recent global market that the expo that happened in Dubai and Uganda between, right? These investors were just looking for Ugandans who they can be able to partner with and fund in different fields, right?
Yeah.
Oil and gas, they want agriculture, they want all the other aspects. But the first requirement that they were requesting for is a fully registered company.
Okay.
How is Omuntu Awansi going to even be able to get to the first step of getting all these documentation done and verified and then go ahead and move towards that direction? You know, of getting this funding or even securing a partnership with one of these companies. Of course, it's going to be easy. Then the target changes and it's now going to the middle class person. The middle class person who you said is going to end up being a capitalist because they would want these resources for themselves. They want to be able to give back to society like they should. You know, in most cases, those companies that are abroad that are going to fund, they have this corporate social responsibility that a lot of Ugandan companies lack. They do not want to know about how their business is going to affect the environment or those other aspects that we are talking about, right? So they end up personalizing the journey for themselves to benefit their families and whatnot. Okay, for example, let's also take a look at the incubation center. The Stanbic Bank one, right? It looks at equipping young people to get them into this space, but of entrepreneurship and be connecting them to the investors and the funding.
Yes.
But even to get yourself to give a pitch in the Stanbic incubation, it's quite a process.
It's a process,
right?
yeah, right.
And there's a lot of entrepreneurs now that want this funding just for themselves, even before they give back to society, because before you give back to society, can you be able to sustain your business, your startup, with that funding? Because the minute they give it to you in the first 3 months, of course, you can give back to what? To society. You're still into building your own brand and startup to become something, you know? So there is a lot of aspects that are supposed to be looked at because, yes, they've given us funding, but have they looked at the state of our economy, you know?
Okay.
There is a lot that it takes for a business to become a business in
business.
Uganda. Because there is statistics that most of them fail even in less than 2 years. They're already at zero. All the money that they got prior to starting has already been lost. Look at the impact of normal initiatives that are within Uganda itself, PDM. How many people have been able to actually kickstart their funding, their businesses just basing off that funding?
No, we've seen successful stories.
Yeah, they are successful stories, but we are weighing the impact. They are looking at poverty eradication as one of their mantras for the PDM. How many regions have been able to get this money and still are facing high levels of poverty? There's still a lot of them, right? And this is because the causes that are leading to this failure of the startups to continue. It's simple, and we are all neglecting the normal values that people lack, you know, in order to be able to sustain their businesses. Things that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. The whole financial discipline talk. Those are some of the things that are failing, and it's not necessarily because people don't want to get there, but they just lack the knowledge.
The knowledge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Exactly 21 minutes past 9. Let's go for the break, and definitely I'll be returning to wind this up. I'm still with Falda Kirabo. This is Smart Means Business. Stick around.
Smart 24, driving business.
These days, our homes are no longer just the places we live. It's where we attend meetings, go to class, keep each other safe,